I thought I'd do a video about guilt around eating. I hear people say, oh, I feel guilty because I've eaten too much, or I feel guilty because I've been eating really bad foods all week. So I think it's important to explore why we might eat, to try and understand why we might feel guilty. So obviously, if we feel genuinely hungry, if we're eating in response to physical hunger, then we're less likely to feel guilty because we're eating according to our body's needs. But then if we end up eating for emotional reasons, or we end up eating because it's just mindless, mechanical overeating, then that's where we're more likely to feel guilty. So if somebody's an emotional eater and they feel powerless when it comes to food, they can feel quite guilty about that. They feel that food has got a hold over them. And that they don't have the power to change or control food. So that can make people feel really guilty. People might also eat maybe because they're bored, or because they're putting off the daily tasks they've got ahead of them, so they can be procrastinating. And they might also be just generally using food for all kinds of reasons. They might also be eating because they aren't addressing deep-seated problems. Maybe they are eating instead of tackling certain emotions or issues that they actually need dealing with. So sometimes when we're eating, it can be used as a way of putting off solving problems. And then we know that deep down, if we're not solving those problems, if we're not addressing the things we need to address, we feel guilty. So there can be so many different reasons why we feel guilty about eating. And that is why, like I say, when it comes to emotions, emotions are really powerful and can lead to overeating, which can then make us feel guilty. And also, when you've got emotional eating going on, it tends to be cravings for, fatty, sugary foods, which don't offer any nutrition at all. And then you feel guilty because you know that you're giving your body junk foods. The problem when people actually label foods as good and bad is that when they do eat bad foods, they then feel guilty. So I think it's really important for people to try to not label foods as good or bad, and to try to sort of neutralize foods, and also give yourself permission to eat foods that you do enjoy, because after all, it's not just about giving your body nutritious foods, but it's about really enjoying food as well. So when you're balancing nutrition with pleasure, you're more likely to kind of feel at peace with eating. So after a meal, it's always a good idea to sort of check in with how you're feeling about what you've just eaten, and then try to work out why you might be feeling guilty. So, have you eaten excessively? Have you ignored your body's signals telling you that you're full? And if so, is that because maybe you're eating for emotional reasons? So you've been craving certain food, and in your head is saying to you, eat. Just keep on eating. I need this. But in fact, it's your body that you should be listening to. So we're talking about emotions, we're talking about mindless eating. Mindless eating in front of the TV, it's very easy to be distracted and to overeat. Also, it's very easy to feel guilty when we're trying desperately to lose weight, and then we go and eat something that we feel goes against our any kind of positive action to lose weight. And we tend to then maybe beat ourselves up because we've eaten a piece of cake. So that kind of catastrophic thinking is also not very helpful, because by saying, oh no, I've eaten a piece of cake, I've blown it, I'm not going to ever lose weight, just makes you feel guilty. It puts you in this negative thought spiral. And in a way, you then sort of take 10 steps back rather than moving forward. So I think when people feel they should always be like on the way to losing weight, they tend to be very hard with themselves. So they feel really guilty when they eat a non-diet food. They might feel guilty for eating high-fat foods, when in fact, fatty foods can be very helpful in regulating our appetite. But also, you know, if you're using food, you are more likely to feel guilty a lot of the time. So if you're regularly using food, then it's likely that you're regularly going to be feeling guilty. So some people eat because they just want to occupy their mouths, or because they're bored, or because they're putting off tasks. It's like an alternative activity. And I think when people know that they should be taking action in some way, but in fact all they're doing is eating, because that's their sort of default knee-jerk reaction, they feel guilty. They feel guilty because they're not making progress. So I think in order to ease the guilt, if you do feel guilty around eating, think about, do you use food in a certain way? Are you an emotional eater? Are you a mindless eater? Are you just simply not thinking about how much you're eating? Are you not thinking about what food choices you're making? Is it all very mindless and mechanical? Are you on autopilot all the time? Address those two things. So look at your emotional eating, and look at to what extent you're a mindless eater. Does a lot of your overeating happen in front of the TV at night, or is it happening at work because perhaps you're bored? Does it also maybe happen in the evenings if you're, say, single and you're lonely? So you're eating for reasons, and again, emotional reasons. Could be also stress, and that's why it's very important that if you're feeling guilty about eating, you need to look at your life. Are you fulfilled, or are you actually eating to fill a void? So there are all sorts of things that we need to be aware of if we find ourselves regularly feeling guilty around foods. It's important to be kinder to yourself, to not label foods as good or bad. And also, if you're always feeling guilty because you feel you're overeating but you really want to lose weight, then you need to think about the three components of ready, willing and able. It's all very well being willing or really wanting to lose weight or eat more healthily, but are you ready and are you able? Do you have the skills? Maybe it's not the right time in your life. Maybe you've got other priorities, because food can easily drop to the bottom, if not drop off the priority list. So it's very important not to be hard on yourself. When we feel guilty, where does that get us? It doesn't really get us anywhere. We just maybe end up eating even more because we're just feeling bad. So, really do a bit of sort of self-work, do a bit of inner work to help yourself. Mindfulness is very much about self-care, compassion, and, just don't set your standards too high. If you feel guilty about the food choices you're making, perhaps you have very high standards. Maybe you've got that old history of dieting where you used to feel guilty a lot for eating certain foods, maybe high calorie foods or high fat foods, and that is still there in your mind somewhere. So it's important for you to take off that old diet hat and don't allow it to make you feel guilty. And also don't restrict your food like you might have done in the past with weight loss diets, because obviously if you restrict, you're going to get overly hungry, which means you're likely to overeat, and then you're going to feel guilty. So think about, are you on a sort of cycle really that takes you to guilt, round to guilt all the time? Do you always end up feeling guilty? What are the steps that are leading to your guilt? And hopefully you'll get some sort of clarification. So I hope that's helpful. I will probably do another video about this, because it's quite a big topic, but I hope that's just a few things to get you thinking.